And obviously Peggy Hora is a leading pioneer in that field. She read some of our work and called us up, and we met her at a meeting of the National Association of Drug Court Professionals. Boy, I bet it was 15 years ago. And we saw that we had a lot in common. And, maybe it was the next year that we started speaking at judges' conferences, the Women Judges Conference, and then the National Association of Drug Court Professionals and others. And when we first started presenting this idea, judges are therapeutic agents. How the judge acts in the courtroom can have important impacts on people's well-being. The women judges were more receptive. The male judges not quite as receptive. But boy, that's changed now over the years, as we've seen that drug treatment court and related courts have become more and more accepted. There are thousands now of drug treatment courts and mental health courts and domestic violence courts and hybrid models like the one that you'll speak with Jerry Cohn about in dependency court for parents of children who are being abused or neglected, where, of course, drugs play an important role. Probably 2/3 of cases involving child abuse and neglect involve substance abuse. Probably 2/3 of spousal battering involve substance abuse. So, of course, those courts began to apply the approaches of drug treatment court to solve those related problems. Is this what we would think about as having the best approach to dealing with these problems? Probably not. These are huge psychosocial problems. Judges are law-trained people who often don't know a whole lot about it. But yet, there's a vacuum in our society. Even though we might know the ways of dealing with these problems, we don't commit the resources. We don't have the preventative approaches, the public health approaches that we really need to do in our society. We've lost that sense of community. We leave these problems alone until they kind of turn over, blow over, become larger, and all of a sudden they get dumped at the doorstep of the courthouse. I was saying about how the courts, how therapeutic jurisprudence has really transformed the courts. And it's not true for all of the courts. Obviously, courts that are still resolving issues of historic fact, who did what to whom, when, where, past history. We need the usual adversarial process where the judge plays the role of umpire. But frequently, in today's courts, we have these horrible psychosocial problems. They get dumped at the doorstep of the courthouse. Again, I use the word vacuum. We're not dealing with these problems adequately in society. The problem boils over, someone gets arrested. It's a drug case, it's a domestic violence case, it's a case of child abuse or neglect. But it's really a psychological problem that has not been effectively dealt with. It's untreated mental illness. What I was saying about the judges is that, these may not be the best people to deal with these psychosocial problems, but in the absence of other preventative kinds of approaches in the community, that's where the problems go. And I think the answer is the judges either can deal with them or not deal with them. I give these lectures and there's always some judge in the back row that says, "Professor Winick, I'm not a social worker." And my response is, yes, you are. If you're dealing with problems of drug addiction, of untreated mental illness, of juvenile delinquency, of child abuse and neglect, of wife battering, you are a social worker, and you need to kind of learn some of these approaches and techniques, get with the program, because you're either going to be a good social worker or a lousy one, and you are a social worker, And so, again, this isn't for all of the courts that are deciding disputed issues of criminal law or contracts or whatever. That's different. But for the courts where the disposition is the issue, where adjudication isn't so much the question, of course these people have done what they're accused of doing. They're not contesting it. They have a right to contest it. They're opting instead in a voluntary way to go to drug treatment court or mental health court or domestic violence court. It's an acknowledgement on their part that they have a problem, that they need some help, that they're willing to try to deal effectively with their problem, and it's a new way of addressing that problem that harnesses the tremendous power that judges have. You know, judges are wonderful authority figures. Lots of these are folks for whom no authority figure in their lives has cared, has paid attention to them. All of a sudden, a judge is saying, wow, Mr. Jones, you're looking great. I'm so proud of you. You've been off your drugs for 2 months now. Let's give him a round of applause. Wow. You know, it's a boost of self-efficacy, which they need in order to deal with the very difficult problem of dealing with these kinds of problems. And so judges playing these roles, problem-solving court judges, I see that as therapeutic jurisprudence in action, really. It's a new way of having judges help people with their psychosocial problems, people who want to be helped. We can't help people who don't want to be helped. And it makes for happier judges. As Peggy Hora's work shows, there was a lot of judicial burnout, and there's a tremendous amount of satisfaction on the part of judges who are being therapeutic jurisprudence judges, who realize they really can help people. What a wonderful idea. And that same idea applies in lawyering. And of course, David and I co-edited a book in 2000 with Dennis Stoley called Practicing Therapeutic Jurisprudence, Law as a Helping Profession. And the subtitle tells the whole story. You know, we need to reframe law. It's not about making money, it's about helping people. People come to the law office with the worst of life's problems. They're going through a bankruptcy or a divorce, or they're facing criminal accusation, or a business partner has screwed them somehow, or they've been in a terrible accident and have been, you know, harmed beyond belief. And they bring that problem to the law office. So of course the lawyer is a therapeutic agent. If the lawyer just sees that client as, you know, tort case or whatever, it's like a doctor seeing a patient as case of colon cancer. No, we have to view the client, the patient, holistically. These are people with human problems. We have to minister to their legal needs, but we also need to minister to their human needs. And this is, of course, an important aspect of therapeutic jurisprudence. We have to understand people. We have to know how to talk with the client. We need to be good listeners, something lawyers are not good at often. We need to convey empathy. We need to have good psychosocial skills. I teach a course here at the law school that I call New Directions in Lawyering, Interviewing, Counseling, and Attorney-Client Relational Skills, where I try to teach these skills to our students. How can you really interview the client and elicit their story? How can you develop the trust and confidence that's needed to do that? And how can you get the client to comply with your advice? It's all in the psychology of that interaction. And so we need to be good with people. We need to teach our students people skills, something, again, that they never taught in law school when we were in law school, but that the schools are now beginning to look at and do. And so this is really seeing the lawyer as a therapeutic agent, the way the lawyer behaves in the law office when he or she interviews the client. It's not bedside manner, it's desk-side manner. And we can help the client through those difficult times, or we can contribute to the problem. There is an emotional aspect to human relations that we can't neglect as lawyers. We're not automatons. If the client is sitting across the desk and crying, we can't pretend that they're not crying, as some lawyers do. We need to convey empathy. We need to offer them a tissue. We need to stop the interview and soothe them a bit. Of course we have to do that. But again, that's not something lawyers are taught to do. So lawyers have a tremendous potential as therapeutic agents, as forces for good or bad in this area, and we need to be self-conscious about that.